Welcome to Trinity Radio. I'm Braxton Hunter, and along with me is
Jonathan Pritchett.
And today we're going to be talking about a lawyer with the Freedom from Religion Foundation who is an atheist and why he's an atheist in 60 seconds. We're going to go longer than 60 seconds, but he didn't.
Welcome to Trinity Radio with Dr. Braxton Hunter and Professor Jonathan Pritchett.
We're forgiven, we're shown mercy and grace, and our punishments probably aren't as harsh as they should be, even within this lifespan.
Do skeptics bring objections to the case? Of course they do.
What's going on with you today? They just don't like it. They don't like it that God is just and he has every right as creator to do what he wills.
God is the best explanation for the beginning of the universe.
Of now y'all having to look at our faces, which for that I apologize.
So we scoured YouTube once again to find a video, and then thankfully and mercifully it was only 60 seconds, actually 58 seconds, and it was a lawyer.
Andrew Seidel.
Oh, good, because his name was forgettable.
Seidel, and that's the name of his YouTube channel is Andrew L. Seidel.
Yes, I couldn't remember his name because it was as forgettable as his arguments.
Well, what I like about him is, number one, he gave us some reasons. We'll talk about whether they're good reasons or not. And he looked the part, like he's a lawyer for the Freedom of Religion or from Religion or whatever foundation. Yeah. So he represents kind of these people. And also, he was the smart-looking guy. You know, I'm Mr. Smart Atheist who you should listen to kind of guy.
My first thing is I don't want to explain why I'm a Christian in under 60 seconds anyway, because that if you're wanting to explain a quick fact about a worldview, that's one thing. So I'm not opposed to like the 1 minute apologist who says, well, here's this issue, and they go over a minute anyway.
The 1 minute apologist. I like the 1 minute apologist, but talk about underachievers. 1 minute, that's all you got? Try 60, pal.
Oh, no, it's actually a lot harder.
No, it's harder to be concise. No, it is.
To ramble on like we do.
It's harder to be concise, and that's a good, I like the
But I'll never shoot a 1 minute video why I'm a Christian in 1 minute, because...
Now that you said that, I'll have to make you at some point. But here's the thing. This is called Why I'm an Atheist, ... in 60 Seconds by Andrew L. Seidel. Now, we're going to go through the different things he says, because since it's only 60 seconds, it's pretty easy. I have them all written down here. I just jotted them down. But you might go listen to it real quick and check it out. The link is in the show notes.
And in fairness, they're reasons, they're not arguments. They're reasons.
Yeah.
But they're underwritten by bad arguments.
Right.
So that's
or no arguments, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and jump in. I think this will be fun. I hope you like these new things we're doing, where we talk about doing apologetics, basically. And it'll be evangelistic apologetics. At the end, the ultimate moment of this show is going to be, I've got a tape player somewhere around here, and we're going to play Just As I Am Without One Plea, and you can just kneel at the altar in your own office or home and pray to receive the Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Honestly, the reason we do this is because we do want people to see that Christianity is a reasonable worldview, and why would you defend Christianity but that people might believe that Christian message is true, right?
That's right.
I don't know why people think that's controversial. All right, faith, this is what he says, faith is not a virtue. Here's the reasons I'm an atheist. Right? Here are my reasons. Number one, faith is not a virtue. Willingness to believe anything without evidence and cling to that belief is humanity's greatest liability.
I agree with that if that was the definition of faith, since that's not the definition of faith, but rather it is a definition for wishful thinking. That's not a reason. I actually think faith is a virtue because that's not what faith is. It is virtuous, I think, to believe based on past performance and the evidence of past performance, and that's kind of a trust and loyalty commitment. It is a virtue to be faithful. It is a virtue to be faithful to one's spouse. The only reason why I'm faithful to my spouse today is based upon the experience I have, the evidence of her being trustworthy for 17 years now.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, and so this idea that faith is believing what you know ain't so, which is Mark Twain's definition, is kind of something he's riffing on here. He's got faith wrong. He's mistaken on not just the definition, but whether or not it would be a virtue. Let me give you an example. I think it is virtuous to have faith in other people. And God is a person, tripersonal actually. And there is a virtue in having faith in people who have provided enough evidence to warrant such faith.
Yeah, I'll have things that I want to say about this here in a few minutes, but I want to play off of what you're saying here because I don't know if you intended to take it in this direction, but it is certainly true that we live in a day and age now where it's almost considered to be a virtue to be skeptical about everything, which I'm not saying we shouldn't. Be aware that there are wolves in sheep's clothing and that sort of thing, even as Christians.
Right. And, well, I don't see how skepticism is a virtue. There is a healthy skepticism, right? But is it virtuous? Is it praiseworthy? No, you're being cautious about giving assent to things. That's not a virtue, that's just a disposition, right? But faith, I think, is actually commendable because it involves otherness besides yourself.
Well, let's go back to the beginning and let's pick up on what you said at the start, which is what you and I often say, and we've said many times on this show and elsewhere, which is faith, biblically speaking, in this context, is believing that God will do for you in the future what he said he would do based on what you have good reason to believe he's done in the past.
Right.
Right? It's not based on no evidence.
Hebrews 1:11.
I remember in
in
the book Core Facts, in one of the appendices, I have a little written debate with a guy named Will, the Atheist, and this is one thing he tries to get me to do is to admit his 21st century sort of idea of faith, like this guy's idea of faith, which is just a blind leap in the dark of belief based on no evidence. Yeah. And so that's not what the Bible means. That's not what faith means.
Yeah, that's more Kierkegaard, type.
Yeah, it's a fideism, which we'll get to that in a second. But Will the Atheist tries to pin me down. He's like, no, look, Webster's dictionary has this definition. Okay, well, what do I care what somebody says in Webster's dictionary when we're talking about what a document that is from, first century Palestine is saying, or the first century Mediterranean world anyway. We need to understand what faith means in that context to those people.
Right.
And when you do that, you find out that what we've been saying, faith is trusting, based on good evidence, that God is going to do in the future what he said he would do because of what we know he did in the past.
Right.
And so that's the opposite of blind faith. I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I don't know if I've ever said this on the show before, but I'll do now what I do in the class, in the apologetics class. As you know, Dr. Pritchett, because you so kindly gave me as a gift for Christmas.
Yes.
Look at you set yourself up with pride.
I kindly gave him something.
You gave me.
And it's so much more sweeter since he kindly did not give me anything.
Well, we've had a long-standing tradition of not getting each other anything. But you were in a bookstore and you happened to see the Space Trilogy from C.S. Lewis and you thought, Braxton's talked about that before. I know he hasn't read it. I'm going to get that for him and give it to him as a gift.
Right. But in fairness, he came back from a road trip and he found a used copy of Darrell Bock's Baker commentary, exegetical commentary on the New Testament. He gave me that. So he has given me gifts, just not Christmas gifts.
Yeah, so I read 2 out of the 3, and I'm on the 3rd one now, and it's just fantastic. But somewhere in C.S. Lewis's writings, there is an illustration, I think, that he uses. I've never been able to find it where I read this. And I have told many a Trinity class, if you can find this for me, I'll give you 2 points extra credit for this course if you can find this C.S. Lewis reference. So I can't verify it or tell you where it is, but here's how it goes. It's an explanation of faith, and I think this is really great. You've heard me talk about it before. If you've read it before, you need to tell me where you read it. But basically what he's talking about is people jumping off of cliffs into water. And how, this is a common thing. When I lived in McMinnville, Tennessee, we used to go cliff jumping all the time. And, he said what people who are fideistic or whatever, the way they're describing it, is like running off the edge of a cliff with no knowledge of what's on the other side. Just jumping blindly off the edge of the cliff. You don't know if there's water down there. There could be swords and knives pointing up, and you're going to die, and you're just blindly running off. That's not biblical faith. Biblical faith is more like this. Looking at the distance from the top of the cliff to the surface of the water, swimming in the water maybe to make sure there's nothing down under there that's going to strike you, a rock under the surface that's going to kill you as soon as you jump or anything like that. And then going up to the top, and then there still is that moment where you have to take that literally like a step of faith, where there's everything in you is like, and then you take that step. But it's not blind. It's based on, evidence, good evidence that this is not going to kill me,
Right.
That's the illustration. And I think that's biblical faith. You can study the scriptures, you can listen to other people's testimonies, you can reason it out, you can think about God's existence and all of those things. And then it's not, there's still a step, but it's not a blind leap in the dark.
Right. And the one thing that I've heard people ask about, that's not to derail the conversation, but the one thing that people have asked whenever you talk about faith in this way, they will say, yeah, that works for everybody but Abraham. And if Abraham was believed God and justified for that, then we have to believe with no prior precedent like Abraham did. So,
Are you asking me to respond to that?
yeah. What is your response to that?
Well, I would say that Abraham believed God, but it doesn't tell us when that faith. Well, in the end of Genesis chapter 11, in the beginning of chapter 12, is that when it is?
Yeah.
In chapter 11, beginning of chapter 12, I think that's right. He is spoken to by God.
Yeah.
That seems like some pretty good evidential material right there.
Yes.
So I don't think he's
That's
believing
exactly
based
how-
on nothing either. He's heard a message from God, right?
Yeah. Leighton Flowers' line of bright lights, big fish. I mean, if you're having a conversation with God, even without anything prior, if God is talking to me, that'd be pretty surreal. And so
Yeah.
I'd probably believe it. Now, that's not to say that...
In fact, in that regard, Abraham had better evidence than what I have. I've
Right.
never visibly or audibly or heard God or anything
Exactly.
like that. Abraham did. He has better evidence than I do,
Right.
as far as that goes.
Yeah. Abraham got what all the atheists asked for. Why doesn't God just show up and tell me and all this? Well,
Right.
But it's also fair to say that Abraham probably knew some prior acts of God, the flood, everything else, maybe put two together. And of course, James says that his faith was, when he didn't withhold Isaac, that was kind of the confirmation of it. So,
Okay, but here's the thing. So we've knocked out number one. We've got several more to go. There's going to be some editing done on this episode, I can tell. Faith is not a virtue. Okay, that's why you're an atheist? Like, there seems like a leap there somewhere. You have to make faith-based statements in your worldview too, on your definition of faith.
eating sandwiches is not a virtue, so therefore you're not going to be a sandwich eater. You're not something because it's not virtuous anyway.
Yeah.
That's not a reason.
Right.
Okay, it's not virtuous to eat. Well, a vegetarian would say it's not virtuous to eat meat, but I don't want to get too sidetracked. My point was, I'm not things simply because it's not a virtue.
Okay. All right. His second reason is it perverts love, requiring us to love an imaginary tyrant more than our family and more than our children. Now, you led off on the last one. Let me lead off on this one. First of all, what is his basis for believing that loving our family and loving our children is a good thing? Like, if God does not exist, I need to know what your grounding is for thinking that love or loving your children or your family even is necessarily a good thing, a positive thing that you should desire, because after all, if God does not exist, we don't have a grounding for morality or for
Right.
any value-based statements, really.
Yeah.
That's one thing. Second, the most obvious thing here is I'm an atheist because the opposite religion perverts love, requires us to love an imaginary tyrant. Well, if it's just an imaginary tyrant, then yes, of course it goes without saying that you should be an atheist, right? But you're presupposing that it's an imaginary tyrant in order to land at the conclusion that atheism is true.
No, you can't disbelieve in Cthulhu just because you don't like Cthulhu. Okay, it's not a reason to be an atheist in denial of Cthulhu.
No, that's not what I'm saying. He says he's an imaginary tyrant. You're focusing on, I said he's a tyrant. He's saying he's an imaginary tyrant.
Okay.
And I'm saying if he's an imaginary tyrant, yes, you should be an atheist.
But that presupposes he's
But that
imaginary.
presupposes that he's imaginary,
Right.
which gets you to your conclusion, I should be an atheist because he's an imaginary tyrant. It's
Right.
circular,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, it's begging the question, is he imaginary?
It's almost like he's saying, I'm an atheist because atheism is true. Well, okay.
But even if Yahweh was a tyrant, that's still not a reason to be an atheist, just because
Right.
you don't like Yahweh because you think he's a tyrant. And by
Right.
what standard, again, do you judge whether or not he's a tyrant? Because you have
Right.
no objective standard if this tyrant doesn't exist, if Yahweh is in fact a tyrant. I think you can make arguments that Yahweh is not a tyrant, but
Of course.
that doesn't matter. Go back to Cthulhu. Cthulhu could exist even if you don't like him.
Yeah, we'd like you to believe in the Christian understanding of God. There are a lot
Yeah.
of theisms out there. We want you to believe in Christian theism. However, if you're an atheist, if the first step is between atheism and theism, sorry, pal. If it's an evil God, then atheism is false. It's kind of like
Right.
several years ago, I think it was 2011, William Lane Craig did a speaking tour and a debate tour in the UK, and he debated some philosopher professor at somewhere. I can't remember who it was, but the guy brought up the problem of evil and the argument from evil and all that. And basically the guy's conclusion was, so there might be a God, but if there is, he's wicked. And so Craig comes out and says, and I've never heard anybody else just say it. He comes out and he's like, well, then atheism is false. Okay, he might be an evil God, but if he is, atheism is
Right.
false.
Exactly.
Of course, for those of you who are new to apologetics and new to philosophy, we do not believe that God is an evil God, or that it's even likely that he's an evil God. Christian theism is true, and God is love, and God is goodness. However,
He's also just.
this is how you do when you're taking logical steps
Right.
with atheists.
Yeah.
So if you already believe that it's an imaginary tyrant, then of course you should be an atheist. However, if God does exist, then yes, it's appropriate to love him more than your wife or your children or whatever. In fact,
Because he gave you your wife.
he undergirds
Yeah.
your love for your wife and your children. And here's the last thing I'll say about this, because this will be, you're pregnant with something, so let
Yeah,
it
well, I
out.
was going to say, and also, if it's family, I mean, there is a sense in which God is our creator. We exist because of him. We ought to say thank you and
Right.
love him.
Right.
Yeah.
You're operating on a scheme where your wife or your spouse or your children or whatever are the highest, like the highest object of love that you should have.
Right.
When if there is a God, well, all that's turned on its head. And this is where you and I remember on one occasion, we're traveling to Maryland, and we were having a discussion about these things, and we were talking about the fact that all sin really is misplacing values.
Yeah.
It's putting more value on an objectively less valuable thing. So, for example, there is some value in perhaps watching a football game. I don't personally find much value in that, but I hear that there is value in watching football games, right? There is some value in that. However, if watching nonstop, NFL games or whatever is interrupting your relationship with your wife, and you don't care, you're still going to watch your NFL, then it seems like you're putting a higher value on NFL than you're putting on your wife.
Right.
When your wife should definitely have more value than the NFL. You're inversing the values, and that's where you get into dangerous situations and you're doing wicked things. And if we're talking about values here, what's the most valuable thing of all? Well, it's a person. It's God. So
The ground of all being.
you should value him the most, and therefore you should love him the most. But if you're an atheist, then everything I just said is silly talk. There is no value. There is no person you should love the most. There is no should, right? And so this criticism falls flat. All right, his next reason, Dr. Pritchett, is the universe is far more amazing than miracles. That's this guy's claim why he's an atheist.
What?
The universe is far more amazing than the paltry miracles in the New Testament.
Okay, I'm glad. Paltry. Stars up there at blinks. Woohoo. Okay. A sea parted? That's pretty awesome. Stars, we can see those every day. No, false.
Well, first of all, I don't believe him. First of all, that's the number one. If you saw a man who was blind and, like really blind, suddenly healed, or you yourself were healed of some horrible disease, or, you saw the sea part or something like that, I do not believe you're lying.
Yeah,
you would not be amazed by that? Are you kidding
me? The Red
me?
Sea is parting. You're like, I'm just going to look up at the sun. Wow, that sun's pretty. I've seen it every day of my existence, but that's cooler than no way. Well, I'm sorry.
I mean, especially in terms of being unusual, right?
Yeah.
Just on those grounds alone. Sorry, Andrew. It's not that I think you're a liar in general. It's just that I'm not sure you've thought through what you've just said.
Right.
is
Stupid the word that comes to my mind. That is stupid. And I'm sorry. That doesn't pass the
Pritchett
sniff.
Prime.
No, it doesn't pass the sniff test. You're not going to sit there and go, I'm going to look at the sky because this is nothing. That sun, that big giant ball of gas, wow, it's so much more amazing.
Here's the thing. If you look at the universe, is the universe amazing? Of course it is. Even Richard Dawkins is sitting over there going, there is a tendency to want to worship something when you look at the universe around you, right? Of course it's amazing, but here's the trick, Andrew. We actually think the universe is a miracle too.
Yes.
We think that the miracles you're trying to avoid to uphold the beauty and wonder of the universe, you can't escape it because the existence of the universe itself is miraculous.
Something from nothing is pretty miraculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't see a universe popping into existence on our set here. So.
Okay, so that takes care of that one. I mean, basically,
and I'm not saying
we don't believe you.
And I'm not we don't believe that. And I'm not saying the universe isn't amazing. It is awe-inspiring. It's wonderful. It declares the glories of the Lord. But it is not more amazing than a sea parting or a resurrection or. I'm sorry.
You said science doesn't work and the universe is not amazing.
I said
That's what you
said
said
nothing
so
fails
far.
as bad as science. That was last week's episode.
Yeah. Okay. What are we talking about? Okay. Here's the next reason that he's not an atheist.
Are we picking on low-hanging fruit? Is that what we're doing?
No, what we're doing is we're doing real apologetics. You know what real apologetics is? That is when someone out there in the marketplace of ideas says, look at me, here's my YouTube channel, look at me, here, your God doesn't exist, and here's why, and throws out some reasons. We look at that guy and say, you've got 100 YouTube subscribers. There's still hope for you. And we say,
Well, this guy's freedom from religion.
He's only got 100 subscribers.
Well, but isn't that Barker's deal?
I don't know.
I can't remember. There's all these associations.
No, we're saying now this is maybe the reason I said try to be nice to these people, but we're saying you're challenging the Christian faith, we're defending the Christian faith. I frankly think that's a whole lot more helpful than arranging some debate with one guy who's already thoroughly entrenched and, I mean, you know what I'm saying? We're talking about real people here on the internet.
Nothing beats that impression. Here I am. I'm on the internet.
Yeah, I've got a YouTube channel. Yeah. Look, if you've got a YouTube channel...
That sounds like us. Look at us. We got a YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Look, we have posters.
I'm inserting myself into the marketplace of ideas, just like they are. If they have a YouTube channel, name it after themselves, Andrew L. Seidel, youtube.com/Andrew L. Seidel, or whatever it is.
The name of our channel is Brexit.
Yeah. I'm not saying this is a bad thing.
Okay.
I'm fair game too.
Right.
I hope.
Please.
We hope they will attack us.
Do it.
But the thing about it is, he's done this. He's turned on his comments and said,
take us on.
When you look, you have to click a little button that turns on your comments.
Yes.
Okay? When you click that little button, you are saying, I'm here, fair game. I want you to interact with me.
Does he have his comments on?
We established this. Yes.
I commend him for that.
Yeah, sure. See, you keep saying
the
like
people I
your
debated,
name is Braxton Hunter. Like I'm saying this is a bad thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. But if that's your thing, get ready to experience our thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Or something.
The people I debated didn't put the comments open on where they hosted the debate. Leighton Flowers put our debate on as well, which has
and
three times.
Neither
and
does James Wyatt. Never turns on his comments on anything.
He doesn't have time for the little people.
Okay.
I love the Peanut Gallery because I'm part of it.
He's an atheist. Here's the next reason. He's an atheist for the same reason you are an atheist about Allah, Osiris,
This
Zeus,
is stupid. No, I do not believe. I do not.
Hey, hold on a second. For the first time ever in the history of Trinity Radio, as far as I can recall, we have an in-studio audience.
Yes.
He doesn't want to be named or recognized. We have a guy in studio watching us record this. And when I said, he knows apologetics, he's into apologetics, big John Lennox fan and all that. And when I just said that last objection, I'm an atheist with regard to all the other gods, you're an atheist with regard to all the other gods, he was sitting over there like, because he knows, he's seen it.
Yeah.
We've all heard this.
Yeah, and this is why it's so stupid. I'm sorry. I don't disbelieve in Allah for the same reason I disbelieve in Thor. There's two different distinct sets of reasons why I reject those, right? I don't deny Allah for the same grounds that I deny Thor. It's not because, well, I'm a Christian, therefore I toss out all others. No, it's like Zeus or Thor. I mean, these people, Allah's a different category. Allah's in the same category as Yahweh, right? Non-physical, entirely other, transcendent of the cosmos and all that. That's a different category that you have to address to reject Allah or Yahweh or whatever than Zeus and Thor and Apollo.
Well, there's one thing that's the same, I think, about all other gods outside of Christianity. And this is going way out and looking at it from a zoomed out view. All ultimately you'll find that they're incoherent. Ultimately, you'll find there's a contradiction. Allah is incoherent.
Yes, and they actually see that as laudable
Yeah.
about Allah, that
Right.
he's beyond logic and reason. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. But still, it's a different category.
The way he's incoherent is much more difficult to deal with than other.
There's different ontological knots to untie.
Sure.
Whereas, Zeus and Thor are all part of the created cosmos. Allah and Yahweh are beyond it. So it's not the same reason
Right.
that you reject them all. And he's just kind of just lumping it all into a bucket and saying, because the ancient Greeks would accuse Christians and Jews of being atheists for denying all of those
Right.
gods but their own.
Right.
So it's not that simplistic. And if he rejects Allah and Yahweh and Thor all for the same reasons, he has not given this the kind of thought that we should take him seriously as an atheist.
Yeah, the reasonable position is, why do you reject Thor? Tell me why you reject Thor. Tell me why you reject Allah. Tell me why you reject Yahweh. What are your reasons for these things?
Yeah.
Because again, this goes back to he's treating skepticism as itself a virtue.
Yeah.
Okay, why then? Why are you skeptical?
Why
about
is there
this?
virtue on skepticism?
Right.
But it's even worse. Because if you ask me if I don't like the question for this reason also. I don't believe in the Christian God for the same reasons you Christians don't believe in every other God. Okay? Now wait a minute. I do and I don't disbelieve in all of those gods.
Right.
We
actually can account for
why ideas about these gods,
Right.
and I believe that you can root that in demonic activity.
Oh, I thought you were going to say ancient aliens.
Or that. Could be.
No, of course. Paul says this, right? Paul says that they are, is it 1 Corinthians 10?
Yeah, there are.
Paul says that you're to idols, you're sacrificing to demons, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that?
Well, I mean, he
Isn't that
says
1 Corinthians
those of us
10?
who have knowledge know that there is no other, there's no gods, right?
Yeah.
But not everyone has this knowledge because other people are still under the belief that those gods have some sort of tangible existence. And there is a sense in which even Paul would admit that, in the sense that demons are probably giving people false ideas about these gods, but they're not.
Yeah.
They don't exist in the way that the
demons
they don't
stand behind the deception.
Right, but Paul's right that these gods, those who have this knowledge that he also warns can puff up, the weaker brothers still think of them of having an ontology that they don't really have.
Right.
And so Paul's, talking about it in that sense. So you and I know there are no these other gods. For us, there's one God and one Lord.
Right.
But for somebody who recently converted from a polytheistic religion may still have some of those hang-ups. And in that sense, maybe the weaker brethren,
Sure.
And so if he's like, no, you can't eat that because that has some sort of connection to his pagan religion or whatever, you give that guy grace. That's what that's about.
Well, of course, yeah.
But at the same time, if you ask me, well, you don't believe in those, well, what do you mean I don't believe in it?
Right.
You think Zeus is real? There's
Well,
a sense
when
I
we do the world religions
Yeah.
class,
Yeah.
the world religions class, we're talking about these other religions, and I say, look, what I'm going to say in this class and the terminology I'm going to use is going to sound to you maybe blasphemous, because you're going to think I'm affirming these other religions when what I'm going to say is Islam false? For the most part. Is Hinduism false? For the most part. Yeah. And by that, what I mean is there are some truths that they have stumbled across. But if you're new to Christian philosophy, what you're going to hear people say a lot is, all truth is God's truth,
yes.
right? If something's true about the way the world is, God is responsible for that.
Right.
Even if a pagan
and
found
by
it.
being made in the image of God, even pagans can stumble upon it. That's why I tell people, whether it's the Christian authors or the non-Christian authors, read the great books, because there's it reminds me of Yoda in The Last Jedi. Spoiler alert. There's much wisdom in them, but page turners they are not. But still, you should read them. I mean, there's truth. The truth of Christ is reflected so much in the creation that by whom in Him consists.
Yeah.
Right. So, because Jesus is holding the universe together, and Jesus is the truth, there's going to be truth that points to Jesus everywhere. Now,
So
people
if we-
suppress that truth, sure,
Okay.
but
We got to
Still.
move on.
Okay.
Last thing that he says. I'm an atheist because redemption through human sacrifice cannot save my soul. I'm an atheist because redemption through. Now let me handle this again. If God does not exist, then fine. There's no saving your soul. You're just going to die and you're going to be dead one day. But if on the other hand God exists, then there may be a really good reason why a particular sacrifice does atone.
Yes, and it's perfectly coherent. I'm going to throw a big word out, but you watch Trinity Radio because we use big words. Supererogatory.
I don't think that's why they use it.
Probably
Why they
not,
watch
but
it.
get a dictionary if you don't. Supererogatory, going above and beyond what you've already done. See, you can't be saved by that because he says, I own up to my mistakes. That, great, but that doesn't erase your mistakes. And you can't do, if I rob a bank, I can't not rob 9 other banks to make up for the bank that I robbed. You can never do enough in the positive to make up for the negative thing against you. That's supererogatory work. And no justice is based on that. Well, yeah, I did rob that one bank, but look at all the other banks in Evansville I didn't rob. Let me off the hook. No, it's not
Well,
going
it
to work.
won't matter to the atheist because if he was a consistent atheist, he would say, I'm just doing what I do.
No,
People
but this
do
is
things
why
they do.
only a vicarious sacrifice that's pure, that has nothing against him, can save. It's why Christianity is coherent in the first place, because supererogatory works is not coherent and no justice is based on it. So that is why he's absolutely wrong, and that the only reason you can be saved is through a vicarious sacrifice of a perfect God-man.
I agree with you, but I'm saying he doesn't believe in anybody getting saved to begin with.
Yeah, I know that, but what he's saying is he doesn't think that that's a good way to save. He says, look at me, I take responsibility for my own bad things, and people can't, he's saying it doesn't make sense. His complaint is it doesn't make sense. No, it makes perfect sense. It's the only thing that does make sense.
Well, and this loops us right back around to what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if there's no God, well, fine. But if there is a God, well, this might very well be for the reasons you're
right, the
commenting on right now.
And in fact, the only thing that is coherent.
But if you don't believe, then why are you trying to borrow from our capital anyway to even talk about salvation and right and wrong and all that? I just keep going back to, and I don't care. It's kind of like with a certain other systematic theological position that we've talked about sometimes. When you kind of put their position really bluntly, they're like, "Oh, geez," and they roll their eyes like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, if that's your position, we're going to call you on it, and you need to be okay with that because that's your position. In the same way, if an atheist continually acts as though there are goods and bads, rights and wrongs, and values, every time they say it, in however many of these things, almost every one, he makes a value statement, we're going to challenge you on the value statement.
Right.
You know, that's part of your position. Now,
The last thing.
well, we're not there yet.
Oh.
There's something else to say about this sacrificial thing. You've heard me say it before. It's not original to me. I think I heard it, if I'm trying to be a scholar and reference my sources, I think I heard this from William Lane Craig in a debate from years ago with Anthony Flew on the nature of hell, or where hell came up. And he gave this great explanation, I think, for why a sacrifice makes sense. Because I'll admit, it sounds really weird to people. But here's the thing. If I kill a cat, which I may well do, which I wouldn't do, but, I mean...
Maybe Indy will kill you.
In a world where there's no God, I might be killing some cats. That's all I'm saying. But I'm a dog person, right? But if I kill a cat, there's a penalty for that. I may end up having to pay a fine. I may go to jail overnight. I don't know. I don't usually kill cats. I don't ever kill cats, okay? But if I kill my neighbor, now I may be going to prison for the rest of my life. I may face capital punishment. Who knows? The point is, the state recognizes, we all intuitively recognize, there's something about his life that is equal in value to my own life. There's something about the cat's life that is lesser in value to my life or my neighbor's life. Now, if you're following that chain of thought so far, and I think that is unassailable so far, then what if someone sins against an everlasting God? Now it's not a cat, it's not a human being. You've wronged the everlasting God.
Right.
Well, now the punishment seems that the just punishment, if justice is the cat has a small punishment for harming a cat, killing a man has a punishment equal to your own life, well, then sinning against an everlasting God should have an everlasting penalty,
Yes.
right? Okay, so a loving God now is in a position where I'm maximally loving, but I'm also maximally just,
Right.
which is what we would all say about God. Well, then what is he going to do? Well, what he's going to do is he's going to display both his justice and his love in a maximal way, which means he is going to have to punish that sin. However, he could send an everlasting person to satisfy that punishment on our behalf, and that's Jesus.
Because you can't satisfy it, because supererogatory works is not justice.
But the point is, if you think it makes sense to say a cat, a man, not as valuable as me, the man is as valuable as me, God, if there is one, is far more valuable.
Oh, but you know there's some relativistic hippie chick out there saying, no, cats are more important than people.
Well, she just needs to stop denying reality. That's all I'm
Right, I
saying.
hear you.
But here's the thing: if that's
not going
true,
out of style anytime soon, though.
if that makes sense, then a human sacrifice, putting it as bleakly as you can, if that's what we're calling this, it does make sense.
And
I think it makes
sense
perfect sense.
That, you know, God can only God can satisfy the penalty for sin, and only a man can die, because God can't die, so God has to become a man.
It all works.
It just makes perfect
all
sense,
works.
and that's why other religions.
Okay, last one. I take personal responsibility for my mistakes. That's why I'm an atheist.
I take
because
personal responsibility for my mistakes and admit that I can't ever make up for them.
Great, you're taking responsibility for your mistakes. That has nothing to do with whether God exists or not.
Right.
Right? Except that your belief that taking personal responsibility for your mistakes, as well as your belief in mistakes themselves, only makes sense as good things if God exists, right? You know?
But Christianity goes one step further than that. It's actually more virtuous to not only as a Christian are you admitting your own mistakes, but you're admitting that you can't do anything to make up for them, and that you have to rely on God, not yourself. This, I take personal responsibility. This is patting yourself on the back. It's backhanded arrogance.
Yes.
You know.
All right, so that brings us to the end of Andrew L. Seidel. Andrew, we would like to roll the tape now and play Just As I Am Without One Plea, and offer you the opportunity to get down on one knee and place your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, I'm joking around, but honestly, we do believe that Christian theism is the most reasonable worldview. And for that reason, we do believe that you should, if Jesus really did all these things, he died and rose again, God raised him from the dead, then you should believe what he says. And what the Bible teaches is that we all are sinners, not because you're morally or ethically worse than anybody else from a human perspective, but because we're all sinners and we need Jesus. And so for that reason, we invite you to repent. That means to turn from your life without Jesus, turn to a life with Jesus. And yes, I mean all of this. I mean, I really mean it. And if you do, or if you're a person who views this video and does, we hope that you'll contact us at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary. That brings us to the point in the show where we tell you that if you already are a believer, we'd love for you to continue your study and your exploration of the Christian faith by talking to us about how you can enroll in classes at Trinity College of the Bible and Theological Seminary at TrinitySem.edu, TrinitySem.edu. Why should I do that, Dr. Pritchett?
Because we're the best seminary on planet Earth. Period.
I don't disagree. You can learn from great minds like Steve Gregg, Leighton Flowers, Dr. Jonathan Pritchett, Steve Selby, Jim Chatham, the list goes on and on, Ingrid Buckwogler, and Elbert Elliott. So
Daphne Washington.
I hope that you'll, and who knows, by the time, you may be viewing this video 10 years from now, and we've got William Lane Craig, Mike Lycona, I don't know, you never know, okay? But we look forward to seeing you virtually as a student here. Please contact us and talk to us. We found out that we have people every month who become students at Trinity because they found out about us through this show. We have more people than that who become students who find out about us through Leighton Flowers show, and we're perfectly fine with that. But
so far, nobody from the Bro Down, they've brought nobody.
Well,
so. Now I got to throw out a challenge in the guy.
Their goal should be to get 0.5 Trinity students per month.
One, yes, okay.
I feel bad for that half a student every month, but anyway. By the way, that's a good moment for us to talk about. We want you to go enjoy our sister podcasts, Soteriology 101 and Bible Brodown, and you can find those. We are proud members of the Trinity Commission, and so are they. And the Narrow Path, .com, Steve Gregg's mountain of resources for you there. Well, I guess that's the end.
Yep.